Welcome to the Fantasy Finish Line. It's Wednesday, September 28th, 2022, and it's Week 4 in the NFL. Tonight we're going to talk about player trends and analysis. We hope that it's a very sweet podcast and you don't sour on us.
Ooh. Very clever.
All right, welcome to the show, everyone. My name is Jason, and I'm joined as always by Dave, the number 10 overall Fantasy Pros expert at the moment. Is that right, Dave?
I love that. I love that you sound so chuffed about it, and I'm excited about it too. But
I'm certainly chuffed.
I would wish for that to be number 1 or 2 or 3.
Of course.
But yeah, after over 3 weeks, number 10 overall so far. 1 week I was number 7 overall. The other weeks I've done pretty well, and I think I'm like in the top 10 for wide receivers. I've chosen them really well over the first couple weeks.
Okay.
So happy about that.
Well, I hope I play you this week in one of our leagues so that I can use this power against you.
Well, I have to have the right players though, to be able to play them. So.
Right.
You can have all the power in the world, but if you don't have the right pieces,
you may know who's good, but if you don't have them on your team, it's not going to help you any.
That's exactly right.
All right, so tonight we're going to talk about some player trends and kind of analyze all that. Since it's been 3 weeks, we like to say 3 weeks makes a trend, so we can finally dive into some trends since it's been 3 weeks of NFL football. We will be sweet on some players and sour on some others, which kind of definitely informs what type of beer we're drinking tonight. In my hand here, I have the Noon Whistle Fuzzy Smack Berliner Weiss with peach. That's the sour beer. And in a little while, we're going to have the Left Hand Peanut Butter Milk Stout, which just looks absolutely delicious. I don't remember if I've had it before. It's probably been years.
You got to love most of the peanut butter beers.
And we got a selection of other treats on the table that we will dive into in a little bit. But first, we made a bet last week. We ate a lot of hot wings, had a lot of super hot sauces. Not a lot, but enough. Quite enough. My face was feeling the effects of the heat for like 2 hours.
We had 5, and we started off nice and gentle. And I forgot to mention this on the show, but the last sauce that we had was actually 667,000 Scoville heat units.
Why wouldn't they just say that it's 666,000?
Because they've had to count all those sprays of a bottle of water.
It's even better? Oh, I see.
So,
You can't lie about Scovilles. What was the name of that sauce?
SHUs. It's the Eye of the Scorpion, and it's a very hot sauce.
Very hot indeed.
And we all enjoyed it, even some people here off camera, and we were all sweating. So it's not like that kind of hot sauce can slip by anybody's purview. It's
right. It's hot for everyone.
It's hot for everyone.
Yeah, but it just made my mouth inoperable for a while. Meanwhile, you were able to just talk like normal.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I was sweating with the rest of us
on the inside.
I've just had a lot of that sauce.
So what we did last week is we picked a small team of 5 players: a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and flex. Dave's team was Jamison Winston, Tony Pollard, Brandon Ayuk, all reasonably performing players. Hayden Hurst really did not come through for you, and you picked Jacoby Myers, who wound up not playing. So you got your substitute in before the game started. That was Russell Gage. Nice job. He was the best player on your team.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it came down to our quarterbacks, to be fair.
It certainly did.
But yeah, I picked a good replacement. There's a lot of players that were in that like 75 to 100 category that I thought were very serviceable, and we're talking about the flex position. So Jacoby couldn't play. I put in Gage. Obviously, Gage in a good position.
Do you remember where he was at in the rankings on the flex?
80-something, 85, 80.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, Treylon Burks didn't do so well. Hayden Hurst didn't do so well for me. The other players were kind of close to each other in statistics, and then it ended up being kind of a Trevor Lawrence wins the day for you.
Indeed it was. So I had Lawrence, Harris, Damien Harris, Curtis Samuel, Tyler Conklin, 12.4 points. Nice game from him. And then Treylon Burks, who did not do much at all. But I finished with 61.38 points. Dave had 58.42. So one of our much closer bets. We've definitely had many runaways before when we make podcast bets. So
runaways.
It was cool to see this one come in close. So any closing thoughts on that?
No, I had to buy beer for this podcast, and I did, as well as some selected candies that go along with the theme. So I hope you enjoy that.
Oh yeah, beer and candy. Feed me that, and I'm happy man.
And I'm sure we'll have many bets left in the season, so we'll see how this whole thing goes.
Yeah, I think that.
But you only won by less than 3 points, so it was a close.
It was very close.
Close encounter.
I thought maybe you would win, and then when I'm adding it up, I'm like, man, he's got a lot of Russell Gage points to add onto it. It's at the very end, but it just wasn't quite enough. Tyler Conklin, 12.4 points. I was really psyched about that because he was kind of a guy that was really way down on the tight end list. And to recommend a streaming option like that to come through makes me very happy.
Well, I think what you should take out of this, and everyone else that's listening or watching on the YouTube channel, which, by the way, subscribe and like this video if you are watching right now on YouTube.
I think I'll like it right now.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. But what we should take away from this really is that these are all recommendations of players that are beyond the always plays, and all of them, for the most part, in half PPR did pretty well. In fact, every player here, besides 2 of them, finished with more than 10 half PPR points, meaning that we're actually telling people some good advice, and that's what I want to get across.
Yes.
We could have had much worse scores from these players that are not necessarily an every week start.
Yeah, we basically average 12 points a player, and if you're averaging 10 points a player, then you're reaching the average.
Yeah, take away the quarterbacks who are going to be probably 15, at least 13, 14 plus for almost all of them.
Yeah.
And I think we did well on the positional skill player.
And we averaged 12 points a player, starting much lower on the rankings than you would have to for your own starting lineup.
Right.
Very nice. So, I write a column every week. It's called Statistically Insignificant. It's posted, well, let's just say my life schedule has been a little tweaked, so I'm trying to get it up on Mondays. It's been going up Monday right around the beginning of the NFL game. So it's a nice little read once you've gotten tired of watching all the goofy ESPN graphics and you just want to have the Monday night game on as background noise. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing to turn to and read. I like to look at some different stats. I try to sign it towards fantasy, but sometimes it just doesn't. Sometimes it's just interesting things to talk about that don't have a ton of fantasy relevance. This week was mostly fantasy stuff, but what's the coolest stat, I think, is that Lamar Jackson has now scored 40 points in a row, 40 points 2 weeks in a row. And I can't think of another quarterback that's done that ever.
I don't know offhand, yeah, but
40 points is probably roughly in the top 20 all-time quarterback performances. Because 43 points reaches the number 10 all-time score.
Yeah, you have guys like Michael Vick that had a 40-point game.
Michael Vick has the biggest game, yeah.
And a couple other ones.
For a quarterback.
But some people were putting out these numbers the top 5 performances so far this season include Lamar Jackson up there at the top. But then also Lamar Jackson without any rushing stats is also number 5.
I forgot. I had that stat. I figured it out. So because somebody mentioned that when I posted the article on Reddit that I think it was last year or his MVP year, if you split up his quarterback and running back stats, he would be top 10 in both positions. So if you pulled out his running back stats this week, he wouldn't, not this week, but this year, he wouldn't be a top 10 quarterback, but he is a top 10 running back. He would be the RB5 on his rushing stats alone. He has 2 touchdowns and over 250 yards or something like that.
Yeah.
So very impressive so far this year from Lamar Jackson. I think I took a while to warm up to him, but I was in Baltimore watching the game at a seafood restaurant, and it was very fun to watch him just go off. And everybody in the place was very excited to see him play. There were 3 teams that scored 16 points on the defense and special teams. The Panthers, the Bengals, and the Browns. That was the high water mark for the week. I just thought it was strange that 3 teams all scored the exact same amount. And only the Panthers had a touchdown out of them.
Just a moment before you continue, we have a question in the chat room from Buddy, and he asks Pierce, Singletary, or Akers at flex in full PPR. I think that's really easy. Devin Singletary has started to get some carries taken away from him by James Cook. Akers is not someone that I'm willing to put any marbles into at the moment. I realize that he had a decent game last week, but that's mostly because of some splash points.
Sure.
And so I'm going Damien Pierce, who Jason will talk about shortly, but I think we both agree is going to have more and more of an impact in the Houston offense. And I think that out of those three, he's clearly the best start this week.
Yeah, you're right. I will talk about Pierce later. I agree with you in this selection that this week I would go with Pierce, which kind of gives you a clue as to whether or not I'm sweet or sour on him. But I'll go over the reasons in a little bit. There was another stat I wanted to bring up, which is that Clyde Edwards Solaire scored 12.4 fantasy points last week as his running back and had 0 rushing yards. And he's not one of those, Darren Sproles type running backs who just catches passes all the time. He had 7 carries for 0 yards and scored 12.4 points. So that's
because of 5 receptions.
That doesn't happen. Yes, but he's not known for being a guy who catches the ball.
Well, I'll be chatting about him later as well.
Oh, fantastic.
But yes, the 7 rushes for 0 yards is not doing him any favors with the team or continuing play time with the Chiefs.
Interesting.
However, the 12 points, and I'll talk about this later, but he's been scoring a lot of points. Whether or not that is something that's indicative of trajectory going forward is something that we'll have a conversation about.
Okay. So let's have a little sip of beer, and then we will move on to our player trends. I'm going to crack open this one.
So the way this works, at least in my mind here, is that when you're talking about a specific player, if it is somebody that in fact you are really positive about, then we're going with the sweet candy and the sweet beer in this case, which is the Left Hand Peanut Butter Milk Stout and Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, which I hope go pretty well together. But
I can't imagine they won't.
You have to keep eating those and drinking those as much as you want until you get to a point where there is a sour that you're going to talk about.
Okay.
So you can't be switching back and forth.
Okay. We'll alternate players, though, to make it more interesting, I suppose. Well, cheers, Dave.
Sweet and sour. All right.
Oh, it smells like a peanut butter cup.
So
what a great start.
I'll post these up on the website as well, drinkfive.com. You can look more in depth at some of the stats that maybe you are breezing over because you're listening to them rather than reading them. I know personally for me that actually looking at or writing down stats leaves much more of an impactful impression in my head than just listening to somebody talk about them.
Indeed.
But I hope that you get something out of this segment.
All right, and cheers to all of you on Reddit who picked up on the Letterkenny references in my last column. I'll have a beer to that. So, we're going to start with my first player, and I will just have a drink of the sweet beer in honor of my guy, Trevor Lawrence. The quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, finally showing that he was worth possibly all the hype that he had last year.
Do you have Jacksonville posters in your room yet?
No, but I have purchased Jacksonville Jaguars jerseys in the past. That's the thing. Okay, so this week he's going to be playing Philadelphia, and he is busting out in his second season. And that's right where you want to see quarterbacks, like young quarterbacks, need to get better in their second year. Otherwise, it's usually a big red flag. He's increased his fantasy output every week this year so far. 14.4 points to start off, 18.5, and then last week he had 25.18 points. His team has scored more points every week. He has had more completions every week. He's increased his passing touchdowns every week. So like it was pointed out on Reddit, he's increasing by 1 every single week. So that trend should continue.
Does that have anything to do
with... And by
week
week 12, we're in really good shape.
With the opponents that he's played? Have they been very good defenses, for example?
So his opponents thus far, the Washington Commanders, I got that right on the first try, the Indianapolis Colts, Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers clearly not a stout defense this year so far.
Colts having troubles as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're not great. And he had like kind of an up and down game in week 1. But if that's the worst game that he has this year, then, that's great. 14.4 points as a low water mark is pretty good for a quarterback.
Yeah, well, I can't argue with the trend so far, so please continue.
Sure. So his ADP this year, going into the season, was around the 19th quarterback taken. Right now, he's the 10th quarterback overall. He's coming off a big win on the road. He's got to have a lot of confidence finally. Now that the team situation has changed, they're 2-1. They've won 2 games in a row. They won, I would say, like a big game for them going to Los Angeles and winning on the road. It's got to be a big deal, really, anywhere they can get a win right now.
Sure.
So I think this is the beginning of Lawrence's breakout season. I really like what I'm seeing out of him. I really think that what you're going to get is a sort of blossoming year for Trevor Lawrence. The Jaguars' offense is going to be better. They're not going to, light it up every week. They're not going to be superstars, but I am very high on him this week. I expect him to be a low-end quarterback one week after week. I expect him to be a definite starter every week in 2 quarterback leagues. And, they have outscored their opponents 62-10 over the last 2 weeks, which is probably a stat that hasn't been beat by anybody else in the league, and something that I find shocking coming from the Jacksonville Jaguars, to be perfectly honest. When you look at their opponents, yeah, it's a little expected, playing 2, middle-of-the-road to bad teams. But that being said, you have to play the teams that are in front of you, and they've done their job there. Trevor Lawrence is playing very well right now. He's got Christian Kirk. He's got James Robinson and Travis Etienne. There is a good core of players around him. Zay Jones was just like a waiver wire hot pickup this week because he had such a big game last week. So there is suddenly a lot of fantasy football value there on the Jaguars, aside from Trevor Lawrence. But I really like what's going on with him. I'm very sweet on him for this season.
You're sweet on him. That's nice.
I will have some Reese's peanut butter cups in his honor.
Please do have a peanut butter cup.
I'm gonna open it and it's gonna sound terrible on the microphone.
That sounds fun.
I'll try and hide that.
It sounds lovely.
I can hear it very clearly.
Well, you're hearing things louder than those folks are driving in their car listening to you, but they really just want a peanut butter cup, and so.
But they can't have one.
A little bit of jealousy,
unless they're extremely lucky and they have some with them.
So a peanut butter stout and a peanut butter cup and Trevor Lawrence. What I like is if we revisit this in a couple weeks and do another segment on trends, and we can go back to these trends that we have these prognoses on. Prognoses? Probably.
Prognosi?
It's not prognosi.
Prognosises?
I would think it's prognoses.
Prognosis.
Yes, it's one of those things. And so we go back to this and see how we've done. Obviously, it's hard to tell because it's going to be based on, to some degree, right?
That works.
Peanut butter and peanut butter go together okay?
Believe it or not.
Well, my first guy I wanted to discuss
peanut butter and chocolate and milk stout.
Was Russell Wilson. Wilson finished the 2021 season as the 16th best fantasy quarterback, but a lot of us still remember him as the guy who finished quarterback 5 back-to-back in seasons 2019 and 2020 for fantasy football. So what happened to him? That last year he was the 16th overall. Now this year he's falling even further behind. Trending down so far since week 1, obviously traded to the Broncos over the offseason, and now on a brand new team for him with a brand new offensive scheme, etc. I'll get to that later. He scored 17.8 points against the former Seahawks team that he was on, 12.06 versus Houston, and 9.06 just last week against the 49ers. Oof. Well, the Broncos ended up punting 10 times on Sunday, and I don't know where that is overall in the history of football games, but it seems like an awful lot of times.
So I think when they got to 8, it was the most that a Russell Wilson team had ever punted.
So he beat his own record twice, is what you're saying.
Easily.
A total of 8 3-and-outs and 10 punts for that game.
That's what it was, 8 3-and-outs.
I see. Seems unable to find his footing and put up a decent effort scrambling, which used to be kind of his forte, and is unable to do that now, even when he's escaping from the pocket. Nothing is really happening there. He hasn't had many rushing attempts in general that are contrived. This is probably a failing of not only Russell Wilson, but also the offensive coordinator and those play calls that are coming out. The Broncos only have 2 passing touchdowns in their 3 games so far this season. The Broncos rookie head coach Nathaniel Hackett is looked at by some people as a genius, as someone who knows all there is to know about the game. There was a lot of buzz.
Wunderkind?
There was a lot of buzz coming in. Yeah, Wunderkind. About Hackett. Obviously, a lot of us saw, if not all of us, probably at least some highlights on ESPN or NFL Network later about him attempting a 64-yard field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 5 in their loss against the Seahawks in Week 1. And that was looked at as a pretty boneheaded decision. Now, it may have been one of those things where if that field goal had actually come to pass, he could have been looked at as a genius. I tend to disagree with that sentiment in general. A 64-yard field goal instead of letting your Russell Wilson that you just spent a ton of money on and invested in heavily get 5 yards on 4th down to put you in a better position and maybe win that game is a horrible decision. And so Hackett did a horrible job. I don't think there's any way around that. Do you see a way where he can escape from that logic?
No, I mean, that was... There are a few, like, universally, like, crapped on, like, decisions like that.
Yeah.
And, like, that is one where everyone came together and said Nathaniel Hackett is terrible at was terrible at his job on that night.
At least what he did that game.
On that night, he was very bad at his job. He's probably a lot better than we give him credit for because it's only been a couple of weeks.
Well, we'll see.
And they did end up winning the game.
They lost the game.
Or against the 49ers, they won.
This was the Seahawks game in Week 1.
Seahawks game.
But this team in general needs to help Wilson by providing better targets. Now, Sutton seems to be the only consistent receiver out there, Cortland Sutton, with Jerry Jeudy, who seems to be constantly banged up so far this season. And I don't know if that's going to reconcile itself or not, but there's really no other wide receiver out there. The tight end, who has a wonderful name, Okwigubunam. I think I'm close. Albert Okwigabunam.
You haven't said it the same way yet.
Okwigabunam. I'm going to go with Okwigabunam.
Okwegabunam? Okwegbanum.
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 Okwegabunam.
Okay. Let's just throw a few more U's in there.
I'm going to call him Albert OK. So Albert OK only recorded 45 receiving yards so far this year. And I don't know if you've been interested in the tight end class over the past 2 years, but he's been a very hyped guy going into this season.
Certainly has been.
Hasn't really done very much still. Now, Hackett needs to lead with an offense that's more grounded in rushing like Wilson was already successful with in Seattle. You would think that someone acquiring Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks could maybe have a little bit of a breadth of work to look at and see what that player is good in.
And they have a good running game in Denver right now.
Sort of.
They have good backs.
They don't focus on the rush as a primary offensive tactic. Right. And they'll have a lot of shotgun plays, etc. Yeah. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense other than like the ghost of John Elway, and he's not dead yet.
What's weird is because Nathaniel Hackett was the offensive coordinator for the Packers, and they did not seem like they would ever shy away from running the ball with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon over the last couple of years. So I don't know why it's suddenly different.
Well, he must have thought that he could change Russell Wilson into more of this shotgun pocket, long ball quarterback. And Russell Wilson has always been good in those situations when he has a focused run game that allows him to be able to have more time for downfield attempts and prevent the defense from concentrating on taking away from his receivers.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I think
that's not happening.
I think that what they need to do is put him back under center so he can run more play action and more bootlegs.
Yeah, so it's clear to us, of course, not
sitting here in your basement drinking beer,
being senior management on the Denver Broncos.
We're Wednesday night quarterbacks.
But I feel like they have to make this shift into something that's more of a Russell Wilson focused offense. It's not like this guy is going to suddenly turn on a dime, become a different quarterback than he was over the past 8 or whatever years he was on the Seahawks. So the Broncos have the pieces here for a team that can make a run at it. We already talked about that. I think that focusing on that run game with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon first and foremost, and finding another working piece for the passing game because KJ Hamler, who's their third wide receiver, is contributing nothing. And Jerry Jeudy still looks to be a little bit bogged down with injuries, etc. This could change, but right now it's really Cortland Sutton who is constantly trying to get free for long ball passes from Russell Wilson, while Russell Wilson is running for his life and the other opposing defenses are not respecting the rushing offense because they're not putting it forward as a primary component of the offense. Anyway, The smart move really here is to move away from Russell Wilson and any other pieces of this offense besides Javonte Williams and Cortland Sutton, who I think can still succeed. But he'll continue to underperform, Russell will. I don't think it's his fault necessarily, but it doesn't matter. He's not going to do well this year. He's certainly not going to finish at the QB5 position. And to be honest, putting him in a finish of like a QB16 like he did last year might even be a tough thing for him to do if they're going to continue to run the offense the way that they currently are. He's looking like an average to below average quarterback in this offense currently. And that's too bad for Russell, and that's a very sour prognosis for him. So,
Indeed.
So I'm going to have one of these sour punch bites, and I'm currently drinking the Noon Whistle peach.
My second guy is Damien Pierce, not to be confused with Damien Targaryen, who graces our screen every week. Thank you, Matt Smith. So the running back for Houston, Damien Pierce. In week 4, he's playing the LA Chargers. They're hosting them in Houston. So as a rookie, it seemed like Pierce was going to be eased into the regular season rotation on the offense, but perhaps that has been accelerated a little bit. He's increased his carries every week. He's increased his overall yardage, and most importantly, he's gone from about 30% of the offensive snaps in week 1 to 60% in weeks 2 and 3. He scored 4.4, 8.2, and then 17.1 points just last week. He's increased his receiving yards every week, though that's kind of a minor output, so it doesn't count as much as the other much more important stats. What I really like to see there is the percent of offensive snaps. When you have a running back and the guy isn't on the field as much, then it's almost worse than them being in some sort of split carries, because if they're on the field a lot, then they're a threat for the ball, but if they only come on the field when they get the ball, then they usually don't have very much success. It takes a guy like that guy on the Falcons a couple years ago, who only came on the field 5 or 6 times a game, and did all kinds of craziness with it. Mm-hmm. So Damien Pierce, I think, going to continue to play well, though he's a rookie running back. So as we would always say, temper your expectations with that. It's not going to be as consistent as someone like Lawrence, who playing from the quarterback position has a big advantage from that aspect, anyways. This week, though, he does have a really good matchup. As we mentioned earlier, Pierce is going to face the Chargers. They have given up the 5th most points to opposing running backs. They surrendered a touchdown and every week so far to the running backs. Pierce has 65% of the team's rushing attempts, so he's in line to be somewhere between like a featured back who gets like the majority of the carries and a bell cow back who gets like all the carries. He's kind of right in between there right now. So I like Pierce going forward. I don't think that he's going to be having his like breakout season like a Trevor Lawrence, but I think that I can confidently say that I'm, sweet on his outlook, and I think that Pierce will do well. I like him this week for sure. I like him going forward, though not as much as I like him this week. A side note on this game, the Texans have the worst rushing defense in the league through 3 weeks. They are 32nd in rushing attempts given up, 32nd in rushing yards given up.
Yikes.
Yeah. They're giving up like 5.6 yards per carry. It's not good. So start your Chargers. I guess it'd be Austin Eckler. So, you were going to start him anyways, but he should be in line for a very good game as well.
We're not talking about Eckler, but Eckler's also had his share of issues. Do you own him on any fantasy leagues right now?
I do.
Okay, so he has in general underperformed where we see some of the other running backs on that team getting a whole bunch of carries. It was sort of unexpected, but I think the Chargers haven't really been playing up to the level that we expect them to. And some of that might have to do with Justin Herbert's injury. Some of that might have to do with some reconfigurations of the offense. But I do expect them to get back into form, and I don't really see a reason why Austin Eckler would drop off so dramatically at this point in his career. So I don't necessarily think there's a big reason to worry just yet.
Yeah, I agree. So this year the Chargers, who's running the ball the most there on the team then? So Austin Eckler still has the most rushing attempts on the team with 32. And then Sony Michel has half that at 16. So even though he's not getting the ball a ton, they're not even running the ball that much, really. They have 67 rushing attempts. That's it. He's still the primary back there. So yep, I'm sweet on him.
Well, feel free to peanut butter it up, man. So Clyde Edwards Solaire is who I'm going to be speaking about. You already touched on him a little bit from your article this week, which is posted on drinkfive.
Mm-hmm.
And he is going up against Tampa Bay, which is a pretty stout defense, and we'll see how he does. I'm going to talk a little bit about how he started the season on fire with the 2 receiving touchdowns in the first match against Arizona. So a lot of people that selected him, that were high on him, even though his ADP was originally as running back 27 in this year's draft on average, we really weren't sure how he might be utilized by this new Chiefs offense. Obviously, there was a lot of rotating pieces at the wide receiver position. And since they underwent such a radical change at that position, there was a lot of talk out there, and I'm sure there was internally as well in the organization, about how Patrick Mahomes might handle that, how things might change a little bit, etc., by shaking up those wide receivers. Well, it turns out that the Chiefs intend to do much of the same at the running back position as they did last year, even though they don't have all the same pieces. One rotated out, a couple rotated in. They actually acquired Ronald Jones, but he hasn't even played yet for them this year. He's pretty much the running back 4 at the moment, sort of waiting in the wings for an injury opportunity. But it looks like it's going to be that same kind of committee as it was for most of last year, where there's not one person that's going to get a whole bunch of the majority of carries. The script that each individual matchup might dictate is going to go right into which players are getting the most points in that game. Now, Edwards has scored overall more than anybody else on that offense, but let's get into why that is. He scored 20.9 points in Week 1, 13.8 in Week 2 against the Chargers, and 12.4 in Week 3 versus the Colts. That is a trend that goes downward, but it's still a large amount of points for someone who was the 27th running back selected.
Right, he's probably, the RB4 right now?
I doubt he's that high.
Well, he was the 3 before the Monday night game, and I'm sure that, Saquon Barkley passed him.
I don't have the numbers.
But, I'm going to look that up.
But in each game, he had a similar rushing amount of attempts. So 7 in the first week, 8 in the second week, 7 in the third week. Very low rushing attempts. And he has been heavily involved in the passing game since the beginning of the season. He has also scored 100% catch rate with those targets, trending up from 3 to 4 to 5 in weeks 1 through 3. So he won't be phased out of the offense, and that's never been the discussion. The discussion is he going to be someone who outperforms his ADP and someone that you can look to as an every week person, or is he someone who's more of a sell high target right now? There's a couple things working against him that we should talk about that have to do directly with his future trajectory. So number one is Jerick McKinnon leads the Chiefs backfield, which is comprised of Edwards Solaire, McKinnon, and Isaiah Pacheco, with a 28% snap share. And rookie Isaiah Pacheco is starting to get more attempts and build more confidence and rapport with Mahomes and company. In other words, in my opinion, and based on the facts that we have presented to us, and also what you said in the statistics that you were mentioning earlier, is Hilaire is a huge sell candidate. So after putting up a couple of decent numbers over the first few weeks, even though they are trending down, looking at the amount of attempts he's had and how involved he actually is in the offense on a play-by-play basis, this is mostly backfield catches and touchdown-dependent point scoring. Both other running backs are constantly vying for opportunities in this offense, and they're getting early down, third down, and goal line work. And CEH is only averaging around 12 touches per game, and 0 rushing yards, like you mentioned, coming from the 7 Week 3 carries that he had, which means that he only had positive net carries from 15 rushes the entire season, which is less than a regular feature back or even above average back on a team might get in one game.
Yeah.
So the only reason why he is up there as a running back 4 or 5 or whatever he's listed as is the touchdowns that he's gotten off of receiving back plays. And those have no guarantee to be involved specifically with Clyde. In fact, Jerick McKinnon is getting just as many passing plays, if not more, in third down situations as Clyde Edwards-Helaire is. So it's a trap. And it's great to celebrate getting some points from a mid-round draft pick, but owners are about to find out really quickly that this is smoke and mirrors, and the last opportunity to sell high is right now. Going up against Tampa Bay is not going to do him any favors, and expect a sour future ahead for the third-year running back, in which he performs at exactly his running back 27 ADP.
So he is currently the RB4 on the season, which is a great thing to point out to people when you're trying to unload him. So.
Yeah, so sell him high, and don't talk too much about the individual stats that he has. Talk about the points that he has.
Yes, I could drink to that. Drink a sour beer, that is. I don't disagree with you on this one. All right, my last player is Brandon Cooks. So he had a very quiet start to the season. He was certainly expected to do better since he was the WR20 at the end of the year last year. He had 3 great games when he started, when he was starting in the last 4 weeks of the season. He did sit out week 16, I believe, but weeks 14, 15, and 17 were all really good, all very important for the fantasy season. This year, he has 22.3 points combined over his first 3 games, 11.7, 7.4, and then 3.2 last week. So I think he's being held back by Davis Mills, who is an okay quarterback at best. It's sort of his ceiling is like mediocrity. His ceiling doesn't quite reach the Andy Dalton line, or wherever that line may be. We're not sure this year. So perhaps he can start to break out a little bit if, as we said earlier, like Damien Pierce can get it rolling a little bit more and be consistent. That means that there will be less focus on Brandon Cooks. But I don't have a ton of faith in Houston. So he is basically the only thing that opposing defenses are focusing on right now. He needs someone else to take at least a little bit of that attention. That way he can be free to do what he wants. What's happened is his targets have gone down. His receptions have gone down. His yards have gone down. But what's happened, like the biggest stat to me is that his catch percentage has gone down each week. Last week he had 7 targets and only 2 receptions. This shows me it's not like he forgot to catch the ball or forgot how to catch the ball. It's that he's being covered and double covered, and all of his catches are contested, and they're very difficult. They're not hitting him when he's open because he's probably not getting a chance to get open at all. Mm-hmm. So he's covered a lot, and this week is a good place for him to kind of turn that around a little bit. The Chargers are giving up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing players, and I think that he's worth sticking for this week at least. But the Texans' offense is far from a juggernaut. Cooks isn't going to be a drop, but he may be a tough start every week. I don't think that you're going to want to be just like leaving him in your starting lineup. You're probably going to be bringing him in and out based on the matchup. So unless the Texans' offense can start overachieving, I don't see a very bright future for Cooks. If he plays well this week, if the Chargers kind of prove that they do have a bad defense, give up more points to him, maybe he's a sell-high candidate. But I am certainly sour on the outlook of one Brandon Cooks. So I will drink my sour beer and have my sour candy. Will you pass me a sour candy, Dave?
Here you go. Let's just switch.
Oh, really?
Because I might have a positive outlook on
you might be sweet on someone? There you go.
Well, I'm not putting it that way, but I guess.
Just have fun with words.
I guess you could. I happen to like Brandon Cooks in general, but I agree that like he's not going to be outperforming any expectations this year, and that if we look at a trajectory, that it's probably not going to be pointing up.
Right. So, that's all I'm saying.
So,
I have him on a team. I will start him this week because it's a good matchup.
Yeah.
But unless like things change, it's going to be a matchup dependent kind of start for me now.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to have a big swig to finish this noon whistle fuzzy smack.
Okay. So while you're doing that, we did have another question. We had a couple questions. We'll just point them out. Yee was asking if you should trade Michael Thomas for Chris Olave. You and I both agree that Olave is the new favorite over there in New Orleans, and that if you can have Olave, you should definitely go for it. And the other question was, should he trade Jefferson for Tyreek Hill and Chubb? And normally I don't like the 2-for-1. I don't like being on the side of getting 2 players for one really good one, but that's 2 good players for one good player. So I would say go for it if you can make that happen. I don't see anyone accepting that trade, but you never know. Maybe it was offered to him.
Well, because you have Tyreek and Chubb that are in the first 3 rounds themselves, and Jefferson, who is probably a first-round pick, or at the very least, an early second-round pick, then you have too much value to turn down that trade.
Right. I don't know who's offering that trade, but go for it if you have been offered that trade.
Yeah, I mean, throw in your Yeezys and get those guys, man.
Yee.
Do you know what that is referring to, right?
Yes.
All right. I don't know how old you are. I forget sometimes.
I'm old, but not as old as you.
Oh, well.
I don't forget that.
I can't argue with that, guys.
No, it's just facts.
All right, so Justin Jefferson, speaking of him, I am going to do a little bit of an expose, and I dug into this a lot because I'm really interested in why it is that he's been trending down. And there are some very apparent reasons when you look at the actual defensive coverage schemes. And I'll go into some detail, so not too much to put you to sleep, but keep your eyes open for a couple minutes here. So Jefferson has really fallen from grace in the eyes of fantasy team managers so far this season. He's gone from scoring 34.9 points in Week 1's routing of the Packers to 7.8 in Week 2's loss against Philadelphia, and then only 2.9 points last week. Many people could stomach a 7.8 if it went back up.
Yeah.
The problem, and the reason why this is a recurring theme and a subject of discussion on all the NFL shows and ours here today, is because Justin Jefferson is one of the highest drafted and looked upon receivers in the NFL right now, having experienced back-to-back years of very, very high production, regardless of what other receivers were on the team, what offensive scheme or coordination configuration was going on, and what kind of defensive stuff was happening to him. But
yeah, I mean, 2.9 points for anyone drafted in the first round is a terrible week.
Yeah.
One that you don't ever want to see.
But having a little bit of perspective on what actually happened during that game may be able to open up your eyes a bit. So what kind of insights from stats from the last few games give us about the rest of the season moving forward? And let's talk about the game versus the Lions. So specifically, against the Lions last week, Cousins spread the targets around evenly among Thielen, Osborne, and Jefferson. A lot of that was because of this really particularly clever way that Jefferson was defended by the Lions secondary. Now, the cornerback Jeff Okudah, and I think that's how you pronounce it, on the Lions has been really good so far this year. And he set up in man-to-man defense with Justin Jefferson. But you can't just take Justin Jefferson on in man-to-man. And if it was just Okudah versus Jefferson, he would still have scored 15 to 20 points and a touchdown and, had that game that you're really looking for from him.
Right.
But the reason why he didn't was because of this. And pay attention. So you had a high safety from the Lions over the top. And you had a bracket safety leaning towards Jefferson's side in the slot whenever Jefferson came to line up in the opposite safety on the top for most plays that was also spying Jefferson for lateral crossover plays, preventing them from developing. And so you had three guys at any time, basically not triple teaming, but leaning towards Jefferson to cut off any routes or anything that was going to occur out there on the field. Now, because of this, we saw Thielen and Osborne soak up a lot more targets than they've had all year. So they both got 8 targets. That's season highs for both of them. And the Vikings were forced to spread out that ball to get a win. Now, they did beat the Lions, but I think we'll see similar schemes from other secondaries focusing on Jefferson down the stretch. And we saw this before last year, but not to the degree of which the Lions tried to play him. Right. They had, the majority of their open players, their safeties, all looking at Jefferson on almost every play. And because of that, the Vikings ended up beating them with Thielen and Osborne. And so what I think that teams will look at is the fact that the Vikings have other weapons that are also going to allow them to win the game, so they may not want to spend all of their resources like the Lions did. I'm not sure that people looking at this game are going to take that same defensive strategy and try to expend all their resources on Justin Jefferson. Now, the Eagles did a similar thing. They double teamed him, but they didn't have all the spying and all the adjacent safeties and all of that work going on.
Wow, this should have wound up in my column. 7 players on the Vikings had more receiving yards than Justin Jefferson.
There you go. Head coach Kevin O'Connell has repeatedly made clear that they will continue to change their scheme and give Justin different aspects of lining up in different spots and different personnel groupings. They know that their offense is based around Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook's success. There is no reason for them not to completely base their offense around that. But what's great is that the Vikings were actually able to win this game, even though there was almost triple coverage on Jefferson the whole time.
Right.
And so I think things will improve for Jefferson because teams simply can't do that. They can't sacrifice that, or they're going to have Alexander Mattison and Dalvin Cook run all over them, and they're going to have Adam Thielen scoring 2 touchdowns like it's 2018. You know, and the Vikings were able to create that good showcase of why teams shouldn't concentrate their whole secondary on stopping Jefferson. So, in my opinion now, I think we'll see a lot of this double teaming. You always do. There's no reason not to think that.
Sure.
But Jefferson can escape double teams. It's this crazy focus all safeties on Jefferson thing that just happened with Detroit that I think was an outlier situation. And time may prove me wrong, but I do think that Jefferson will reverse this trend and his fantasy points should creep back up towards last year's 16.3 points per game average. I do think, though, that he's going to end the season with a finish a few spots lower than last year's WR4 overall finish because of the fact that it's just a simple fact. He is more out there than he has ever been. There's more tape on him than there has ever been. And so until O'Connell and Jefferson are able to put some things out there that no one's seen before, you're going to have a lot of those regular routes that are run that are going to be covered by that back safety and man coverage, or by 2 safeties cutting off the possibilities of extra yardage on a play. Regardless, I think that we're not seeing Jefferson slow down or decline. We're just seeing the degradation of a variety in the playbook of the Vikings.
You must have been good at essays in high school.
and they really do need to spice things up a little bit, sweeten the pot, as it were.
Ah, there we go.
And I absolutely think that Jefferson's numbers will come right back up. So not something to be afraid of. Certainly don't sell him low, like the gentleman that was talking on our chat earlier was saying.
Well, I mean, if you can get Tyreek Hill and Nick Chubb for him, then why not?
Right.
But don't just go unloading him for no reason.
Yeah, don't sell low on Jefferson. That's crazy. If you wait 3 more weeks and then look at the stats, I would be really surprised if he's not up there in where he should be in like the top 8 to 10 wide receivers.
I concur.
So
Jefferson has way too much talent to be bad all year.
Yeah,
it was just a game that a team overly focused on him, and teams will learn that they can't spend that much attention on Jefferson and hope to win the game. So they need to dial it back a little bit, and that's going to open it up for Jefferson.
So I finally get to try the peanut butter stout. I was thinking I might just be sour on all the players because that's my general.
That's your outlook on life.
Yeah, that's not true. But it is easy to be sour on players that are trending down, and all of the players that I talked about were all trending down. And so you really have to work hard, I think, to look at those downward trends and make them shift upwards. Look for that bright side, right?
Sure.
Any other guys that in general for you kind of check the boxes of you're looking at them do poorly, but you think they're going to go back up?
There wasn't too many. I mean, like, it's only been 3 weeks. There's not a lot of trends that are becoming very noticeable yet.
Yeah.
But, like, when I see players that aren't playing well, the ones that stick out to me are, like, let's see. Let me give you a few. I'm surprised that, like, Derrick Henry and Devontae Adams aren't doing better. They should be leading the world in everything.
Well, the answer for that is the Raiders and the Titans are not good teams.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because, like, Darren Waller also not doing a lot.
Right,
so that's a common theme there. Alvin Kamara, he did miss a game, but then, he's only got 14.9 points on the year. Not enough for an Alvin Kamara. I want to see the 49ers offense pick it up. Garoppolo's going to be there all year, so maybe it's going to take him a couple of weeks to get into it since he didn't have the preseason and whatnot that normally you would get from that spot. But, I want to see George Kittle and that old combo, the Garoppolo-Kittle combo.
Sure, but if you watch the game this past week, the 49ers were horrible.
They were. I think the Broncos' defense is good. It's the offense and the coaching decisions on offense that are just mind-blowingly bad.
So I mean, yeah, I think those are valid guys to talk about. But the problem is, I don't think any of those guys that we talked about just then are going to get any better until the team itself turns itself around. Right? It's these are team problems.
I think so. So a couple of guys who are doing really well, Carson Wentz. Do you think that that's sustainable, or is that like a flash in the pan?
Well, something Carson Wentz was always good at is picking a target and peppering them with passes. And so I guess a lot of these quarterbacks, they're all at the top of their game, right? They're playing in the NFL. So really it's about what's the offensive scheme and how difficult is the offense. And I'm not knowledgeable enough about like the offensive schemes that the different coaches have.
Okay.
Because there's the different coach trees, and then what kinds of offense those particular coaches have, and then how complex or simple the offenses are for those quarterbacks, and how much they're allowed to do their own audibles and call their own plays.
Right.
I would think that if you put Carson Wentz in a really controlled and simplified situation, that he'd be a good quarterback.
He's good at throwing the ball.
Right. Yeah. It's a primary goal of a quarterback.
What about a guy who has been tested a bit more, Jared Goff? He's a QB9 on the season right now, and he finished last year pretty well. He's started this year pretty, doing well as likewise as well. I don't know. I keep saying the same damn word over and over again.
Yeah. So Detroit is an interesting animal. They have a lot of playmakers, and Jared Goff was never a bad quarterback in theory. Maybe it was just an offensive scheme thing with the Rams that he was unable to run. And maybe he's not asked to do as much here with the Lions. Again, that's going to require a little bit more very specialized football knowledge. It'd be great to have a guest come on that was, intimately familiar with the Detroit Lions offensive scheme. They could talk about some of that, how it's different from the Rams, et cetera.
Yeah.
But clearly he's performing at a high level for Jared Goff, right, and a high level for the Detroit Lions. Right now,
true.
They're scoring points, and it's really excellent to watch. But I think they have playmakers now that they haven't had in the past, and we're looking for Jamison Williams to come on as well, who's one of the most highly rated rookies coming into this year's draft. And so you got a guy like DJ Chark that they hired to have a 1-year contract to come in and show what he's got. He hasn't really done that, and I think Jamison Williams is going to come in and end up being the 1B to Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, there's a lot of room to pass Josh Reynolds.
Yeah, well,
on that team,
those two guys plus DeAndre Swift / what's the name of the
Jamal Williams?
Yeah, Jamal Williams. I think they have, and TJ Hawkinson. Like, they have a great, a building young team.
Indeed, they do.
And Jared Goff is a part of that now.
I mean, Jared Goff made a Super Bowl. He only scored 3 points in the Super Bowl. And I guess he doesn't even get credit for them because it was the kicker.
He got there, right?
He got him there.
Congratulations, Jared.
Yes, well done.
Yeah.
So, anybody else you want to bring up?
No, not at all. Just looking forward to next week. I think later on in the season, we'll probably come back and revisit the topic of player trends, and we can pull this back.
Oh, sure. Player trends is one of our favorites.
And say, maybe we did a good job, or maybe there's things that we didn't see.
Right. And it'll be interesting to take a look back at this maybe in 3 weeks.
Sure.
You see if they've trended the other way.
But, sweet and sour, it's all part of the game, right?
This one was sweet. I'll finish off with the sweet. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like the video that you just watched, or give us a review wherever it is that you do wind up listening to the podcast, and follow us on the social media networks, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter and stuff. You can find us. We're Drink5. Nobody's stealing our name yet. We're good. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Cheers, everybody.